This is the Galleon 100 SD from CORSAIR, helpfully provided by them for a review, also to see if I can complete my ultimate editing station for podcasts and for video. And yeah, don't worry, I'll cover some of the features you can also use this when gaming. Don't worry. So, let's find out. Now, honestly, even though I'm working with computers all day, every day, I've never been a peripheral snob. I can say that's mainly due to the fact that I'm not really that serious of a gamer. And don't get me wrong, I still love me an awesome game or two of Civ 6 or even 7 these days. But I'm not usually the main demo for gear like this. But then when I started using the Elgato Stream Deck seriously in my editing flow, I'm now starting to see everything in a new light. And before you think this is just about stuff I do for the video, you kind of have to remember something. I edit a lot for a living, and the less amount of time I'm editing, the more money I can make per hour, which means more time to do stuff like this. So realistically, I am, more than most people, driven to find the best possible setup for editing. And I think this thing can help. Oh, and before I forget, this thing ain't cheap. $350 to be exact, but as I well know, even a basic gaming or productivity keyboard can be rather pricey already, so I don't think it's that far outside of realistic for many people. But with that price, you get something that flat out feels premium. Even from its weight alone, this thing feels well built. Now, I'm used to the Logitech G815, which is much thinner and lighter than this, but it's also known to slide a bit over time when you're working or gaming. Also, for all you mechanical keyboard nerds, while I'm used to Logitech's clicky switches, I have to say the sound of this keyboard is way better and just all around nicer to use. However, I am used to the wider layouts of Logitech, so it is taking me a bit of time to get used to the more compact CORSAIR board, but I am getting there. As for the Stream Deck portion of this keyboard, it's everything you expect it to be, except for one thing. The screen isn't touch, which I was kind of expecting, though not anything like a deal breaker. Also, this thing is very much like a mini Stream Deck Plus, so you get those two knobs. As for connecting the keyboard, this thing takes 2 USB cables to get it up and running, and considering everything that comes along with this, it does actually kind of make sense. Now, of course, you also have that USB-C pass-through. And lastly, this comes with a wrist rest, which, by the way, this is my first keyboard with a wrist rest. That's a sweet deal, and I don't think I can ever go back to not having a wrist rest. So if you saw my last video about the Stream Deck Plus XL, I love my G keys on my Logitech. However, weirdly enough, they're not as necessary as you might think. In fact, the G1 key just ends up taking over the number 1, and so on. So it's not like it's anything special, it's just a great way to position your hand to minimize your movement. And I'm going to say this again, movement takes time. And if you can minimize your movements, you will find that your edits go super quick. There are 2 kinds of movements that you have to watch for. One is your left or your keyboard hand. This hand will be firing any keys assigned on the left of the keyboard. Then, of course, you have your mouse hand. And to be fair, I'm not much for mouse shortcuts, but one day I might jump in to see what all the fuss is about. But this hand is literally only for cursor movement. Now, this is the hand that has the most movement and time moving. So this is where we may be able to do some finagling to work this out. So much like I was doing with my Stream Deck XL, I went through an editing session, paying attention to every time I needed to move my cursor around. And a couple things stood out. First is my zoom in and zoom out. Now, this can only be done with the scroll wheel when you move over the axis you want to scroll. For example, if you want to scroll north and south, you have to be over here. To scroll zoom, so to zoom in on the project, you have to be up here. This is a pretty easy one to set up. So just drag over a keystroke and you're going to enter in what the keystroke is. This would be the plus or the minus, and then you're going to name it. Then we're going to do that all over again for the zoom out. pull over the keystroke. We're going to name it first this time. Zoom out, and then just go down here and choose what keystroke it's going to be. There you go. And now you'll see you will zoom in and zoom out, just like that. Next, the toggle between multi-track and waveform is also very helpful. Then we have some spot cleaning. For example, plosives. Now, sure, you can go into your favorites or you can assign them to a key. And when they're in favorites and when you toggle them, the effect is just applied so you don't have to go through all of the settings. Now, it's not really handy when you have to change certain things in the effect, but for stuff like deplosives or mouth declick, wow, does this ever speed things up. Another great thing that I'm also adding is the ability to one-touch open programs, specifically things like Isotope. Think programs like maybe you're not necessarily opening them up all the time, not enough to keep them in the dock or in your taskbar. And finally, I was able to set up profiles for each podcast that I edit for. Minds of Madness is a way different workflow than Generation Y. It's so bloody handy. Now, if you're just here to get a scoop on whether or not this is a good idea for you as a gamer, well, this thing's pretty sweet. Now, honestly, it took me a little bit to get used to, but eventually my Diablo 4 playthrough was silky smooth. And there's a ton of different profiles you can download, both paid and free, for different games. There's even one for Civ 6, which I found kind of weird. That said, I don't know about paying for them. It takes a little bit of elbow grease, and it's pretty easy to set one up for yourself for whatever game you're playing. But if you started relying on a Stream Deck while gaming, this just gets in closer to your hands to use in-game, which is pretty sweet if you ask me. However, not really gaming, but there's also a ton of productivity stuff in those profiles you can download. There's even a profile for controlling Claude, which is, I guess, cool, but also like, wow. So this is a definite yes from me. And if you're just getting started on an editing journey and you want to streamline some of your workflow, this is actually a great way to do it. And I can't stress enough how important it is to get that streamlined workflow working for you. In the end, you're going to save yourself a ton of time. And of course, this is going to be a powerhouse for anything like that. Again, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the easier this stuff is going to be and the faster it's going to be. And I can only say the more Stream Decks you have, the more use you will find for them, or at least I am. But if you're thinking of using this, may I suggest you start slow. Now, don't get me wrong, this is an awesome keyboard, and you can find a ton of use for it. But $350 is a lot to drop on something you aren't sure how to use. Something like just a regular Stream Deck Plus is a great starter. Then you can move up to something like this. And yes, this thing is staying in my workflow and it's staying on my PC because I do find myself editing with DaVinci now and again. And well, this thing's a huge help. And let's be honest, that Civ 6 profile is going to get some use too. What do you think though? Do you want to see more stuff like this and perhaps even some editing workshops? Let me know down below. Cheers guys, and thanks for watching.